Most people lose control the moment they realize they have been lied to. Their voice changes. Their face tightens. They rush to expose the truth. But here is the uncomfortable part. Calling someone a liar often gives them exactly what they need. A warning. The moment you confront them, they stop revealing themselves. They become careful. They change the details. They delete evidence. They rehearse better answers. And suddenly, you are no longer watching their real behavior. You are watching a performance designed specifically for you. That is why emotional intelligence does not always look like immediate confrontation. Sometimes, it looks like silence. Not weak silence. Not fearful silence. Strategic silence. Imagine someone tells you they were too busy to reply. But you know they were online. You saw the activity. You noticed the timing. Every instinct tells you to say, "I know you are lying." You want the relief of putting them on the spot. You want them to admit it. But they probably will not. Instead, they may say you are overthinking. They may accuse you of being controlling. They may create a second lie to protect the first one. Now the conversation is no longer about what they did. It is about how you reacted. That shift is not accidental. People who lie often survive by moving attention away from their behavior and onto your emotions. They make your anger the new problem. Your tone becomes the issue. Your questions become too much. Your memory becomes wrong. And before you realize it, you are defending yourself in a conversation they should have been explaining. So do something different. Do not immediately call them out. Slow down. Listen longer. Ask calm questions. And pay attention to what changes. A lie rarely stands alone. It usually needs support. More details. More explanations. More carefully placed excuses. The longer someone talks, the more structure they must build around something that never happened. That is where the truth begins to show itself. Not always through a dramatic confession. Sometimes through hesitation. Sometimes through unnecessary detail. Sometimes through a story that changes slightly every time it is told. Your job is not to become a detective obsessed with catching every inconsistency. Your job is to observe whether their words and behavior continue to match. That difference matters. Because one strange sentence proves very little. People forget things. People explain themselves poorly. People become nervous when they feel judged, even when they are innocent. But repeated inconsistency is different. When the explanation keeps changing, when basic questions create unusual defensiveness, when their words ask for trust but their behavior keeps creating doubt, you are no longer dealing with one confusing moment. You are dealing with a pattern. And patterns tell you more than promises ever will. Suppose you ask someone where they were. They give you an answer. You do not attack. You simply say, "Okay." Then later, naturally, you ask about a small detail. Not like an interrogation. Just calmly. A truthful memory usually remains stable, even if the person forgets minor parts. A fabricated story often becomes harder to maintain. The timeline shifts. A name appears that was never mentioned. The reason suddenly changes. And the most revealing part may not be the inconsistency itself. It may be their reaction to a reasonable question. Emotionally mature people can usually tolerate clarification. They may feel uncomfortable. They may even feel annoyed. But they understand why trust requires openness. Someone hiding something may treat every question like an attack. That reaction gives you information. But do not make the mistake of believing every defensive response proves guilt. It does not. Context matters. History matters. The health of the relationship matters. Your goal is not to judge one emotional moment. Your goal is to notice the larger emotional pattern. Do they usually take responsibility? Can they admit when they are wrong? Do they answer direct questions clearly? Or do they repeatedly confuse, redirect, blame, and disappear? This is where many people betray themselves. They become so focused on proving the lie that they ignore the deeper question. What does this behavior reveal about the relationship? Even if you win the argument, what have you actually won? An admission? An apology? A temporary promise? None of those automatically rebuild trust. Trust is not repaired by the perfect sentence. It is repaired when future behavior becomes consistent. That is why the strongest response is often not, "You are lying." It is, "I noticed that your story changed." That sentence is calmer. Cleaner. Harder to escape. You are not labeling their character. You are describing what happened. Then stop talking. Let the silence do some work. People often reveal more when you do not rush to fill the space. A guilty person may over-explain. A manipulative person may become aggressive. An honest person may pause, reflect, and clarify. You learn more by watching what they do next than by delivering a 10-minute speech about honesty. This is especially important in relationships. When attraction, attachment, and fear of loss are involved, people often react from emotion instead of self-respect. They demand answers immediately. They send long messages. They repeat the same question in 5 different ways. Not because they are weak. Because uncertainty is painful. The mind hates incomplete stories. It wants closure. It wants certainty. It wants the discomfort to end now. But urgency can make you accept explanations that do not actually make sense. You hear an excuse. You feel temporary relief. You decide to believe it because believing feels less painful than facing what the lie may mean. Then the doubt returns. Usually stronger. Because deep down, your mind is not confused by what was said. It is disturbed by what does not match. Words say, "Trust me." Behavior says, "Do not look too closely." That tension slowly damages your peace. So instead of chasing reassurance, create emotional distance. Not as punishment. As clarity. Reduce the pressure to reach a conclusion in one conversation. Watch whether their actions become more transparent without being forced. Notice whether they repair the damage on their own. Notice whether they care about the impact of their dishonesty, or only about avoiding consequences. This distinction changes everything. Someone who values the relationship will usually care that you feel unsafe or confused. They will want to make things clearer. They may not respond perfectly. But there will be effort. There will be accountability. There will be some willingness to face discomfort. Someone focused only on self-protection may do the opposite. They may minimize the issue. Mock your concern. Turn cold. Become extra charming. Or create just enough affection to stop you from asking questions. And that last one is easy to miss. Not every form of manipulation looks cruel. Sometimes it looks romantic. A sudden compliment. An unexpected gift. More attention than usual. A soft voice after days of distance. These things are not automatically manipulative. But when affection repeatedly appears only after accountability is requested, pay attention. Love should not be used as a smokescreen. Healthy affection brings people closer to honesty. It does not help them escape it. Now comes the hardest part. What should you do when you are almost certain they lied? You make a decision based on the pattern, not the confession. Many people stay trapped because they believe they need the other person to admit the truth before they are allowed to respond. But you do not need a signed confession to change your boundaries. You do not need courtroom evidence to step back from someone whose behavior repeatedly destroys your peace. You are allowed to say, "This no longer feels trustworthy to me." That is not an accusation. It is a conclusion about your experience. Then your boundary should match the seriousness of the pattern. For a small issue, it may mean asking for clearer communication. For repeated dishonesty, it may mean reducing access, sharing less, depending on them less, creating space, or ending the relationship entirely. The boundary is not meant to force them to become honest. That is not in your control. The boundary protects you from having to keep negotiating with behavior that has already shown you what it is. And this is where self-respect becomes visible. Not in how loudly you expose someone, but in how calmly you respond once the pattern becomes clear. Anyone can explode. Anyone can send a long message at midnight. Anyone can threaten to leave. Strength is leaving the emotional courtroom. You stop arguing your case. You stop begging the person who created the confusion to become the source of your clarity. You accept what their repeated behavior has already communicated. Sometimes they will call you cold. Sometimes they will say you changed. Sometimes they will suddenly become honest when they feel you pulling away. But even then, do not let one emotional confession erase a long pattern. Listen. Stay open. But watch what happens afterward. Real accountability produces different behavior. False accountability produces temporary emotion. Tears are not always change. Apologies are not always repair. Regret is not always responsibility. The evidence appears later. Inconsistency. Intransparency. In the choices they make when they think the crisis is over. That is why you should never rush to reward words. Give time a chance to reveal whether the apology had weight. Time removes performance. Time exposes effort. Time shows whether honesty was a moment or a new standard. And while you watch, stay honest with yourself too. Sometimes we accuse others because of old wounds. Sometimes fear creates stories that facts do not support. Sometimes a delayed reply is only a delayed reply. A forgotten detail is only a forgotten detail. Emotional intelligence means questioning your assumptions as carefully as you question their explanation. Ask yourself, what do I actually know? What am I assuming? Is this an isolated event or a repeated pattern? Am I responding to this person, or to someone who hurt me before? That self-awareness protects you from becoming unfair. But it also protects you from being easily manipulated. Because once you separate facts from fear, you become much harder to confuse. You do not need to shout. You do not need to prove you are smarter. You do not need to reveal every piece of information you have. You simply observe. You ask. You remember. And when the pattern becomes undeniable, you act. That calmness can feel unfamiliar at first. Especially if you were taught that strength means confrontation. But the deepest form of strength is not forcing the truth out of someone. It is knowing you can make a wise decision even if they never give it to you. Because the moment you stop needing a liar to admit the lie, they lose the power to control your reality.